I want to give you a really good example of how I get myself distracted and all of my plans seem to go off the rails when I have another good idea. So I have made changes to the dimensions of Union Station and I'm really happy with that now. And so I just wanted to be able to plan out the spacing here so that I can figure out where the other buildings might go, which means I was just taking a look at this overpass and making sure the dimensions were right there so I could make the risers. And I wanted to duplicate those measurements for the second bridge that goes here. And then I was considering the fact that I need to have embedded streetcar tracks in both of them, and those streetcar tracks would disappear under the horizon, except I could turn the corner and come down the back of the wall, and now I could have a point-to-point streetcar that races between these two roads. And I think I'm going to make that. The area I'm modeling around Union Station has been compressed significantly. Some of the key features I'm focusing on are the bridges at Spadina and Bathurst, which then frame in the Bathurst fly-under. As I've been gathering footage and photos for reference, it's been pretty hard to ignore that there is a constant stream of streetcars passing over the yard. I have never considered modeling a streetcar, and I wasn't even sure what models were available. However, after conducting a bit of research, I discovered that Cato manufactures a generic-looking train called MyTram. I did some experimenting in Photoshop, and I realized that adding a white and black stripe would be all that was needed to create a reasonable facsimile of a TTC train. That's a project for future me, but I'm looking forward to it. When I first built my benchwork, I hadn't planned for this new rail line, so I had to start from scratch and create an elevated baseboard above the main line. I had to measure, level, and install supports along the wall, much in the same way I did when I was building the first sections. So I'm working on the two bridges that span the Bathurst Yard. Union Station's over there. So this is Spadina Avenue and Bathurst Yard, or Bathurst Street, is over there. And I've added some plywood abutments. I'm trying to get the upper level leveled with it. I've got my template for how I need to lay out the streets and the tracks. And I'm using some really nice 3/16 good one-side oak plywood to make a smooth transition. And so I've added a stiffener level that's set back exactly the same as the prototype. I'll add some rusted I-beams along the edge. It'll look great. And the only problem was I glued the damn stiffener on the wrong side of the bloody bridge. So now I have to redo that one because there's no way that's coming off. To construct the bridge bases, I opted for laminated sheets of thin plywood. I glued the two plates together and temporarily clamped them by screw nailing them directly to my workbench. I chiseled away the ends to create lap joints for the bridge abutments. I want the flexibility to remove the two bridges, so although the screws will be visible, it's a reasonable compromise as I do not want to sacrifice any access to the staging yard. Let's talk about the final arrangement of the streets. The two main feature streets that I've included are Spadina Avenue and Bathurst Street. Just like the prototype, these two streets are connected by Front Street, which offers a fantastic view of the Bathurst Yard. Now, to create a connection between the two streetcar routes, I've added Wellington Avenue into the mix. Most of Wellington Avenue will be hidden from view, except for one small intersection that I've created at Portland. I was actually really excited when my order from Cato finally arrived, as it meant I could finally get a closer look at one of the MyTram units. Everything about this little engine is impressive, especially its articulating chassis. It runs so smoothly along the track, but its tight tolerances require that the track work be precise and free of obstacles. Following the same technique I used when designing the original baseboard, I printed out track templates and glued them down as a guide for my track work. I installed code 55 rail, pinning it in place, and then applying super glue and using an accelerant to secure everything quickly. It's super important to ensure a strong bond since my tram can navigate a 6-inch radius curve, which is exactly what I used here, and I certainly don't want the track to let loose. While working on the layout, I only added the tracks that spanned the bridge joints, slicing the tracks with my razor saw along the seam once they were securely in place. This way I could move everything here back to my workbench and work comfortably rather than leaning over the layout itself. In order to create the illusion of a double-track streetcar route, I added some dummy tracks. I 3D printed a very fine and flexible plastic form that fits snugly alongside the rails, allowing me to create a fake diamond as well as guardrails. I mixed up a thin batch of plaster of Paris and carefully piped it between the forms to simulate tracks surrounded by concrete. For the roads and sidewalks, I opted to use 1 mm thick styrene. I cut the styrene to fit around the rails and used my laser cutter to engrave the pattern of sidewalks and create scoring lines. This provided me with a super handy supply of sidewalks that I could easily snap and install. I hadn't totally considered how the tracks intersected with the roadways, so in order to bank them, I used some milliput and installed it to create ramps over top of the rails. Once finished, I reinstalled everything back on the layout so that I could add the last of the sidewalks, roadways, and concrete barriers. To avoid any future disasters, I gapped the rails at each end of the point-to-point track. I'll be adding diodes to ensure that the tram never travels further than the ends of the bridges. With all the tracks, roads, and sidewalks in place, I tested the tram. Overall, it ran really well, although I needed to clean and fine-tune some of the curves. It turns out that even the slightest imperfection causes the streetcar to get hung up. So, there you have it, a fully operational streetcar line above the Bathurst yard. As I continue with the project, I'm considering building an automatic reversing circuit, possibly using an Arduino controller or some other circuit assembly. I have a lot of painting and detailing work ahead of me, but for now I am super happy that I have a bustling scene with plenty of eastbound and westbound passenger traffic going through the Bathurst yard and now accompanied by a streetcar gliding above it. With this major milestone achieved, I can now shift my focus back to my original plan of working on Union Station and its surrounding area. Although there's still a lot of work to be done on the bridges and roadways, I don't necessarily need to complete these parts until diving into other projects. Thanks for tuning in, and I'll see you next time.